Let's define an exponential function. Function of x is equal to a raised to x, where a should be greater than 0, not equal to 1, and x is any real number. Ito ang example, or ito ang graph ng function of x is equal to a raised to x. Looking at this graph, we can determine the domain. So the domain of a graph is its x-axis or x values. The domain is negative infinity to positive infinity kasi we can see that the graph is extending to the negative values of x and extending upward to the positive values of x. The parenthesis is like this because ibig sabihin hindi siya magta-touch sa negative infinity and positive infinity. Now for the range, it's 0 to positive infinity because the range is all the values of y. The parenthesis is also like this because it will never touch the 0 point of y until the positive infinity. Now for y-intercept, we can get this by letting x is equal to 0, substitute it in the equation, so a raised to 0 is equal to 1. Now we know that x is 0, y is 1. For the horizontal asymptote, it's x-axis because we can check from the graph that it will go through the negative infinity of the x-axis but it will never touch the x-axis. Now for graph of e raised to x, this is the graph of e raised to x. Halos pareho lang siya kay y is equal to a raised to x. But for the domain is still the same. You can see that values of x is negative infinity to positive infinity. The range, the values of y of the graph, so 0 to positive infinity. Now y-intercept, again you set 0 as x. So e raised to 0 is 1. And then horizontal asymptote, still x-axis because it will go through the negative infinity of x-axis but it will never touch the x-axis. So ganyan, and the parentheses are like this kasi it will never touch those points that we define. So take a look at the graph. Pareho lang halos ang graph ni a raised to x at e raised to x. Value of e raised to x is about 2.71. Constant siya. Now let's practice graphing an exponential function. Now, let's evaluate these exponential functions. So, function of x is equal to 3 raised to x. So, x is equal to negative 2. Substitute mo lang siya sa x value. So, 3 raised to x, 3 raised to negative 2, law of exponent, it becomes 1 over 9. Now, for x is equal to 0, 3 raised to x, 3 raised to 0, any number raised to 0 is 1. Now, for x is equal to negative 1, 3 raised to negative 1, law of exponent, pag negative ang exponent, it goes to the denominator, so it becomes 1/3. So, on the next slide, I have posted some sample or practice problems. You can solve them and screenshot them and solve them. I will be posting solutions on a separate post.
Hit the plus button for more videos.